Introduction to Mosi and Abeni's love. In the heart of the African savannah, there was a village where the bond between Mosi and Abeni was known to all. Their love was the kind of story that inspired songs, whispered from elder to elder, and passed down through generations. It was a bond built on mutual respect, unwavering trust, and shared dreams. The sun, the stars, the plains, they were all witnesses to a love that seemed unbreakable. Mosi was a strong, steady man, and Abeni, with her grace and radiant beauty, brought joy to all who met her. Together, they were seen as the embodiment of harmony, a love untouched by time, untouched by hardship. The first signs of trouble. However, as the seasons changed, so too did the undercurrent of their relationship. Though Mosi loved Abeni deeply, he began to notice something that gnawed at his heart: Abeni's ease with the other men in the village. Her kindness, her laughter, her openness, all of it, to Mosi, began to feel like a threat. The other men admired her, but to Mosi, it felt like something more. Small glances, fleeting touches, innocent conversations began to grow into dark obsessions in his mind. His jealousy began to whisper poisonous thoughts into his heart. Abeni's loving nature, which once had been the thing that made him fall in love with her, became the very thing that caused him turmoil. It was not her fault. It was his own insecurities that twisted everything he saw into something dark. The breaking point. It was during the village's yearly celebration of harvest when Mosi's jealousy reached its breaking point. The drums echoed through the night as villagers danced, laughed, and celebrated. Abeni, as always, was at the center of the festivities, her laughter rising above the music. But this time, Mosi watched her closely, his eyes narrowing as another man lingered just a little too close to her. The laughter that had once sounded like music now sounded like a mockery. He could no longer hold back. He confronted Abeni with accusations, his voice sharp and filled with an edge of bitterness. Abeni, taken aback, tried to explain, but the words only made Mosi angrier. In the heat of the moment, his jealousy spiraled out of control. He said things he didn't mean, things he couldn't take back. Their argument escalated, and in a moment of rage, Mosi's actions took a tragic turn. He lashed out, and the damage was done. Abeni's death. When the villagers found Abeni, her life had been tragically cut short. Mosi, shaken to his core, told them that she had fallen ill, unable to face the truth of what he had done. The village mourned the loss of Abeni, the beautiful, kind, and beloved woman who had once been the heart of their community. Mosi, though, was left with a heart that no longer beat with love but with unbearable guilt. The pain of his actions was a weight he could never escape. He had broken something sacred, and no amount of time could undo the damage. His love for Abeni had been pure, but his own demons had destroyed everything. The love that had once been the shining star of the village was now a tragic reminder of how quickly things can fall apart. And the worst part was that Mosi could never bring her back. The beginning of the haunting. Mosi's grief was a constant companion, a shadow that clung to him day and night. But it wasn't just his sorrow that tormented him. Slowly, in the stillness of the night, Mosi began to hear Abeni's voice, soft and sweet, as if she were calling to him from beyond. At first, he thought it was merely a figment of his imagination, a trick played by his conscience. But the whispers became clearer, more insistent. Soon, he saw her, her figure, pale and translucent, lingering in the corners of his house. She was always there, watching him with those eyes that once held love and warmth. Mosi couldn't tell if it was his memories of her, or something more, but he began to wonder if Abeni had truly left him. The line between the living and the dead grew ever more blurred, and Mosi was trapped in a nightmare of his own making. Mosi's isolation. The villagers had begun to notice Mosi's strange behavior. Whispers of his deteriorating mental state spread through the community. He no longer greeted them with the same warmth, his eyes distant and haunted. But Mosi didn't care about their gossip. The weight of his guilt and fear was more than enough to consume him. Every night, As darkness fell over the village, Abeni's presence would return. Cold, pale, and distant, she would lie beside him in their shared bed. Her touch was as cold as death itself, but Mosi couldn't bear the thought of her being gone completely. The haunting visits were both a source of torment and a twisted comfort. Mosi was trapped in his own home, trapped in his memories. He couldn't run from her, or from himself. The birth of a child. One morning, Mosi awoke to an eerie silence, an unsettling stillness that was different from the usual quiet of the early hours. As he sat up, his eyes fell upon something that left him breathless. In the corner of his room, a small baby boy lay swaddled in cloth, his eyes wide open, staring at Mosi with an unnatural intensity. The child, a perfect blend of innocence and mystery, seemed to glow with an ethereal light. Mosi's heart raced, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. How had the child come to be here? And why had he appeared now, at this exact moment? The village was far from the cradle of any living child, yet here he was, as if placed there by an unseen hand. The baby, who would later be named Kato, did not speak, nor did he cry. He merely lay there, quiet, waiting for Mosi to take him in. Despite the unnatural circumstances, Mosi felt something stir within him, a deep, overwhelming need to care for the child, as though it were his sole responsibility to protect him. It was as if this child were a gift from Abeni, a chance at redemption for his terrible sins. The guilt that had plagued him now found a new focus, Kato. He would raise the boy, nurture him, and atone for what he had done to his mother. But the truth lingered in Mosi's mind. Could this child truly be Abeni's? Was this a sign from the beyond? Or was it merely another twisted manifestation of his own broken heart? Regardless of the answer, Mosi could no longer deny the bond that was forming between him and Kato. The child had arrived in the most unnatural of ways, but in his eyes, Mosi saw the possibility of a new beginning. And so, he embraced the role of father, knowing that the path of redemption would be long and fraught with uncertainty, but it was a path he was willing to walk. Kato's unsettling growth. As the seasons passed, Kato grew, but not in ways that Mosi had expected. The child seemed to develop at an unnerving pace, his body growing stronger, but his mind remaining far beyond his years. By the time Kato was 5, his silence had become more than just unusual, it was unsettling. He never cried, never laughed, and never spoke unless necessary. Instead, he watched the world around him with an intensity that felt like it pierced straight through to the soul. His eyes, dark and knowing, were far too old for his small face. Whenever Mosi caught his gaze, he felt an unsettling chill run down his spine. It was as though Kato was aware of things Mosi could never understand. The villagers began to whisper even more, their suspicions growing with each passing day. They spoke of the strange child who never smiled, who never played, and who always seemed to know more than a boy of his age should. They said that the boy's presence brought an unnatural coldness to the village. When Kato passed by, the air would grow inexplicably chill, even in the heat of the savannah sun. Mosi could no longer deny the strangeness of it all. Despite his attempts to be a good father, the child remained distant, unreachable. No matter how much love Mosi tried to give, Kato only grew more distant, like an enigma wrapped in silence. The growing darkness. By the age of 5, Kato's behavior had grown more erratic. His presence seemed to cast a shadow wherever he went, a presence that unnerved not just Mosi, but the entire village. He would wander the house at night, muttering to himself in a language Mosi didn't recognize. He spoke of things he couldn't possibly know, details of Abeni's death that Mosi had never shared with anyone. It was as if the boy was aware of every moment of the tragedy, down to the smallest, most intimate details. He would stare at Mosi, his eyes cold, as if accusing him of something unspoken. Mosi couldn't shake the feeling that Kato was hiding something, that his son was somehow connected to Abeni in a way that defied reason. Kato would sometimes stand by the window at night, staring out at the stars with an unsettling calm. His voice, when he did speak, was cold and emotionless, as if he were an old man trapped in a child's body. Mosi tried everything to break through to him, to form some kind of bond. But the more he tried, the more the distance between them grew. The child's awareness of Abeni's death only deepened Mosi's sense of dread. It was as if Kato carried a piece of the woman he had loved, and the piece he carried was filled with anger and sorrow. The child seemed to be silently judging him, holding him accountable for something Mosi couldn't even begin to understand. The moment of revelation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mosi found Kato standing by the fireplace, his eyes locked on him. For the first time, the boy spoke. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that Mosi could feel in his bones. "I know what you did," Kato said, his gaze piercing through Mosi like an arrow. Mosi's heart froze. The words hung in the air, thick with accusation. Kato's eyes, so full of knowing, seemed to cut straight through the walls Mosi had carefully built around himself. The truth was out, and Mosi couldn't escape it. His son, born under such strange and mysterious circumstances, knew the truth about Abeni's death. Knew that Mosi had killed her, consumed by jealousy and rage. And now, it seemed, Kato was the embodiment of that truth, silent, watchful, and cold. Mosi stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The guilt that had been festering inside him for years now roared to life, choking him. Kato's gaze never left him, and for a moment, Mosi saw not a child, but something far older and far more dangerous. The boy was not just a child, he was a reminder of everything Mosi had destroyed. Abeni's death, the lies he had told, the guilt that had eaten away at him, it was all staring him in the face. As Kato stood there, unmoving and unfeeling, Mosi realized that his son's silence, his distance, was not mere indifference. It was something far more ominous. Kato was a living embodiment of Abeni's vengeance, and Mosi had no idea how far the boy's knowledge, or his power, would reach. The revelation hung in the air, the truth undeniable. Mosi could no longer deny the supernatural forces at play, or the impossible bond between his son and the spirit of Abeni. The child was not just a reminder of Mosi's sins, he was the reckoning. And Mosi was left to face the consequences of his past, knowing that Kato's true nature was just beginning to unfold. Mosi's attempt at redemption. After years of carrying the weight of Abeni's death, Mosi felt the heavy burden of grief begin to wear him down. He longed for peace, for a new chance at happiness, and to find redemption for his past sins. It was then that Zola entered his life. She was a woman with a kind heart, someone who had also experienced loss, having buried her own husband not long before she came to the village. Zola's warmth was a balm for Mosi's wounded soul, and in her presence, he began to believe in the possibility of love once more. Zola's kindness and compassion began to transform the darkness in Mosi's life. She spoke to him with gentleness, and her laughter filled the empty spaces that Abeni's death had left behind. For the first time in years, Mosi felt hope stirring in his chest. The villagers, too, began to accept Zola. She was a woman who had known suffering but chose to bring light wherever she went, and her presence was like a breath of fresh air for the village. They began to see her as a symbol of healing, a new beginning for Mosi and the entire community. But despite this new chance for happiness, Mosi could never truly escape his past. Abeni's memory, though distant, still haunted him, and in the corners of his mind, he wondered if he was truly worthy of the love Zola offered. Could he ever escape the shadows of his actions? The strain between father and son. However, not everyone was pleased with Mosi's newfound joy. Kato, who had grown even more distant and cold over the years, saw the budding relationship between Mosi and Zola as a betrayal. The child, already a vessel of anger and sorrow, began to resent Mosi's attempt to move on from Abeni's death. Kato would watch from the shadows, his eyes burning with fury whenever Mosi and Zola were together. He would retreat into silence, glaring at Mosi with an intensity that could freeze the blood. Mosi, troubled by the growing distance between himself and his son, tried to reassure Kato that Zola was not a replacement for Abeni. He explained that no one could ever replace her in his heart. But Kato would not listen. His hatred for Mosi grew with each passing day, and the more Mosi tried to explain, the more Kato pushed him away. It was as if the boy had become consumed by the darkness of his own pain, unable, or unwilling, to forgive Mosi for his past. The tension between father and son became unbearable. Mosi would often find himself in tears, torn between his love for Zola and his overwhelming guilt towards Kato. But no matter how hard he tried, it seemed that Kato's resentment could never be eased. The child's silence spoke volumes, and in his silence, Mosi felt as though he was losing everything. Kato's deal with the spirits. Consumed by his anger and thirst for revenge, Kato could no longer stay in the village where he felt abandoned and betrayed. One night, after everyone had fallen asleep, he sneaked out into the savannah, his small figure cloaked in the darkness. He walked for hours, driven by a need he could not understand, a deep yearning to see his mother's spirit rest in peace and to exact justice for her death. Eventually, Kato found himself standing before the ancient baobab tree where Abeni had been buried. It was said that the spirits of the ancestors gathered around the tree, watching over the village. The tree was sacred, and its power was felt by all who approached it. But Kato, in his fury, felt no fear. He knelt before the baobab, whispering the words that had been swirling in his mind for weeks. I call upon you, spirits of the ancestors. I demand justice for my mother. She was taken from me, and I will not rest until her death is avenged. The air grew still as Kato spoke, and the shadows around him seemed to come alive. He could feel the weight of ancient eyes watching him, the presence of spirits both old and vengeful. In his heart, Kato made a pact. He promised the spirits that he would carry out the revenge they demanded, that he would ensure Mosi paid for what he had done. In exchange, he would receive the power to exact that vengeance, no matter the cost. As the last words of the pact echoed through the night, a cold wind swept through the baobab tree, and Kato's heart quickened. He could feel something dark stirring within him, something that had been awakened by the spirit's presence. In that moment, Kato knew that he had sealed his fate, and the fate of his father. With the deal made, Kato returned to the village, his eyes now carrying the weight of an ancient curse. He was no longer just a boy, he was a tool of the spirits, an instrument of vengeance. And Mosi's life, already filled with regret and sorrow, would soon be shattered by the very child he had tried to raise. Kato's vengeance unleashed. The village awoke to an eerie silence that morning, a sense of dread hanging in the air. The sun, barely breaking through the clouds, cast long, ominous shadows over the land. But it was the baobab tree that drew everyone's attention. Carved deep into the bark of the sacred tree were words that sent a chill down the spine of every villager: justice will be served. Mosi, upon hearing the whispers of the village, felt his heart freeze in his chest. He knew, without a doubt, that Kato had gone too far. His son, now a vessel of rage and vengeance, had called upon the spirits to carry out the punishment that Mosi had feared for so long. The weight of his actions, the tragedy he had caused, now seemed to echo in every rustling leaf and every sigh of the wind. Kato's eyes had always held an unnatural depth, but now, those eyes were filled with the promise of destruction. Mosi knew that the time of reckoning had arrived. The storm of spirits. The day dawned heavy and oppressive. The skies darkened as if mourning the tragedy that was about to unfold. A fierce wind began to howl, rattling the branches of trees and sending the villagers scrambling for shelter. The very air seemed charged with an unnatural energy, and it wasn't long before the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The spirits of the ancestors, awakened by Kato's pact, gathered in the sky. Their presence was like an ancient storm, their whispers like the cries of the forgotten dead. The villagers cowered in their homes, afraid of the wrath that was descending upon them. The baobab tree stood at the center of it all, its roots twisting and writhing beneath the earth, alive with the power Kato had summoned. At the base of the tree, Kato stood, his body surrounded by a swirling vortex of shadow and power. His face was twisted with fury, his eyes glowing with the energy of the spirits that now surrounded him. Mosi, drawn by a force he couldn't explain, walked toward the tree. His heart pounded in his chest as he saw his son, no longer a boy, but a being filled with the vengeance of the ancients. The battle between father and son. Kato's voice rang out, dark and unyielding, as he declared, "You must pay for what you did. The spirits will see justice done." The ground beneath Mosi's feet shook as the baobab tree's roots exploded from the earth, wrapping around Kato like serpents. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the sound of whispers, the spirits now fully unleashed and at the mercy of Kato's will. The villagers, watching from a distance, could do nothing but tremble as the father and son stood locked in an impossible battle. Mosi's heart shattered with guilt and fear. He could see the boy he once loved, the boy he had tried to raise, now consumed by an anger so fierce that it threatened to tear apart everything in its path. The power Kato wielded was immense, far beyond anything Mosi could fight. But Mosi couldn't give up, not after everything he had done. The love he had for his son, despite everything, still burned deep within him. With trembling hands, Mosi called out to Kato, "Please, my son, listen to me. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I loved your mother more than anything. I was wrong, but this isn't the way." But Kato's eyes blazed with fury. "You took her from me. And now, you will suffer. The spirits demand it." With a wave of his hand, Kato unleashed the full power of the spirits, sending a wave of dark energy surging toward Mosi. The ground beneath them cracked open, and the roots of the baobab tree lunged toward Mosi, wrapping around him like chains, squeezing tighter with every passing second. The ultimate choice. As Mosi struggled against the growing power of Kato and the spirits, a voice cut through the chaos. "Mosi!" It was Zola, rushing toward him through the storm, her face filled with fear and determination. She had heard the cries of the village and knew that the moment of truth had come. She reached out to Mosi, her arms trembling, her eyes locked on the father she had come to love. "Mosi, please. You have to fight him. You can't give up now." But Mosi's gaze was fixed on Kato, his heart torn in two. He could see the hatred in his son's eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at him with love. But now, all he could see was the rage and pain Kato had inherited from his mother's death. Mosi's voice cracked as he spoke, "I don't know if I can save him, Zola. The darkness inside him is too strong. It's all my fault." Zola knelt beside him, taking his hand. "No, Mosi. You've always loved him. He's still your son. You can reach him, you have to." The spirit's power intensified, and Mosi felt the weight of their anger pressing down on him. He was running out of time. Kato's power was growing, and soon, it would be too late to stop the destruction. With a final, desperate cry, Mosi called to Kato, "I know you're in there, son. I know you still love me. Don't let the spirits take you from me. Please." For a moment, there was a flicker in Kato's eyes, just a moment's hesitation. But then the darkness returned, and with it, the fury. The earth shook as Kato summoned the spirits once more, and the final confrontation began in earnest. Mosi now stood at a crossroads. He could give in to the power of the spirits and let them take his son, or he could fight, not with force, but with love. He had to make the ultimate choice. Would he save his son, or would he let the spirits take the life of the boy he had once called his own? As the storm of spirits raged around them, the answer would soon come.